All right, it is 1 p.m. and we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here. It's not lost on me how difficult it can be to spend a full hour to just talk about something like an email welcome series and just dedicate that time to training and learning. So I'm super grateful for your time. Hopefully we steward that well over the next hour or so. And before we jump right into the email welcome series, before I hand things over to Courtney to share all the great data and learnings that she has, there are a few housekeeping items that I want to cover. The most popular question on any webinar is this: is there going to be a recording? And the answer is always yes. So we are recording this webinar. We will share this with you. We'll send this recording out later this afternoon. Around 5 p.m. typically is when I get this sent out. So we will record it. We will send that to you. I'll also include some additional links both to slides as well as to other resources that are mentioned today. If Courtney mentions a specific resource or an ebook, we'll send you those links so that you have all of those. So don't worry about taking furious notes. We'll try to send you as much of that stuff as we possibly can. And then number three, one of the best parts of these webinars is that we make some time at the very end for additional Q&A, question and answer, with whoever the presenter is. And so today that's Courtney. So if you've got questions or ideas or thoughts that come up throughout the presentation, feel free to use that chat box that you've already been using on the right side of your screen. And then if you're on a mobile device, it should be below the video player. Use that chat box to pop your ideas, your questions, your thoughts that you'd like for us to chat about later during the Q&A time. Whenever they come up through the webinar, just put them in there. I'll be keeping track of those throughout, so we can ask those of Courtney later on. So that's all those key housekeeping items. There's one thing I wanted to mention, and we'll talk about it a little bit at the end of the presentation as well. But we have this workshop coming up. It's an all-day certification workshop. We like to do these in person. This one is virtual because we can't really all get together in person these days. So this is a virtual certification workshop on email fundraising optimization. So it's kind of taking some of the concepts Courtney's going to talk about today, but diving way deeper. So we're going to go deep on how to craft your emails holistically, from the sender to the subject line, copy and design, even talking about some tactics that you can use to grow your email file, as well as how do you actually construct a donation page for your email campaign that's going to produce donors and revenue. All this, the cost of it is $199. Again, it's about a 6-hour workshop. You can block the whole day, spend the day with us. Between Brady and myself, you'll have 2 live instructors, opportunity for Q&A time, breakout sessions with other classmates. So it's a really cool environment. You can check this out at nextafter.com/virtual workshop. Learn all the details and go ahead and get registered if you're ready to go. But without further ado, I want to hand things over to Courtney. Courtney is my good friend. I've known her for many years at this point, and it's a pleasure to continue to get to work with her. But then on top of that, she's incredible. She's a vice president here at NextAfter, works with many different nonprofit organizations, doing things like creating an email welcome series, writing a bunch of copy, running advertising, running fundraising, everything that you can imagine in the online fundraising space. Courtney's doing it, and she's a total pro and an expert. So happy to leave you in her hands for the next about 45 minutes or so to talk about email welcome series.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan. I am so excited to join you all today to talk about email welcome series. I really, truly love this topic. It's something that I'm working on every single day, every week with multiple organizations. And there's so much that we have even learned in the past, even 6 months. Something that I know now is very different than what I was doing a year ago, because we're continuing to learn through data and testing and seeing how people respond to the communications that we're putting out there, how best to do this. So before I get into that, I do want to tell you a little bit about myself. This is a picture of me and my brother and sisters. I am a farm girl at heart. That is me milking our pet cow, Moses. That's me holding the milk bottle. I am from northeastern North Dakota. I just returned from there. My mom has been resurfacing some images that I hadn't seen in a long time. And so I wanted to share that little bit with you. I am outside of NextAfter. I'm also a mom of 2 boys. They are my heart and soul. They have been little optimizers themselves over these past few months as we've been doing school and work and now summer all under one roof, like I'm sure so many of you. So let's get started now that you know just a little bit about me. But let's first talk about how we need to build an email. And I'm sure right now you're thinking like, Court, I signed up to learn how to build a welcome series, not how to build an email. I do this every single day, but I want us to really think about what makes up an email. because an email welcome series is not an email welcome series without that email. So you have your sender line, and then there's the reply line. You've got your subject, your reply to, you have preview text in there. Then when they open it, you have this email template. And even within the email template, there's so many elements that make up this email itself. You have your salutation and your introduction, the body copy and the call to action, the signature. And there's so many pieces and parts. And I don't know if we often look at them with a fine-tooth comb. And I do want to ask that question, like, why do we actually send emails the way we do? You know, is it just because we like to? Well, when we ask this question with other organizations and peers, these are some of the responses we get back. It's on brand. That's the way other nonprofits do it. Well, it looks nice. It's part of our email template. This is what we've been given. And of course, that common phrase of, well, we've always done it this way. And if we were in person, which I wish we're not, but if you were here with me, I would ask you that same question. Why is it that you send the emails that you do? Why do they look the way they look? Why do they sound the way they sound? Why is it? And most likely your response would probably be something like this, because we've always done it that way, or because that's how leadership likes it. And what I want to do is actually challenge your thinking and to actually take a look at why you're doing the things you're doing. To kind of drive this home, I do want to take a look at an experiment. This was done with an NPR station. You can see it's a typical email marketing email. It has the big header on top, the body copy. It's an appeal, so it has this countdown to their goal. And then at the bottom, it has, you know, an image of the host and a big donate button. And when we look at this, we thought, well, is this the best way to present this communications? Are we speaking to our donors in the right way? Is there a better way to do this? And so we flipped this email on its head and presented this one. Some might think it looks ugly, and honestly, it does. It probably is not aesthetically pleasing. And some of the changes that we made are, you know, we removed the big header image at the top with all of the branding. We then removed all the big donate button and put a link in instead. And even in the signature, we removed the person's picture and just simply put their name. And then even at the bottom in the footer, there was a lot of social sharing icons towards the bottom of it. And we just removed them completely and just kept what is required in order to send email marketing. So you can see, you'll see them side by side here. Here's version A. It's a little bit more designed. And then version B on the right, which is much more plain. When we ran this test, we found that we actually saw a 28% increase in clicks from the design version. So one might think, oh, great, like that's the winning version. That's what we should go with. But the principle of this test is not to get more clicks. It was to get more donations. And so when we ran the metrics on that, what we actually discovered was that the plain text version increased donations by 29%. So as you're thinking about how you're sending your emails, consider that. Maybe the designed one is going to get you more clicks, but you're getting higher qualified traffic with the plain one as a result in this experiment with an increase in 29%. You see, the reason why this happened is that people will treat digital experiences like they're experiences with real people. Because what we know through all of the data and the research and studies that we have done is that people give to people, not some email machine. So let's drill down and look at the email a little bit more closely. We're going to start with the envelope of the email. Now, what's the envelope? I know we're talking digital here, so it's not like an actual tangible thing you can feel, right? But it has a lot of the same principles as an actual mail piece. The email envelope includes the sender name and the date and the recipient name, the subject line, the preview text. All of those are part of the covering of the main message. You know, I want to know, what do you think, you know, the envelope actually looks like to the reader? It probably looks something like this. This is actually probably what your email inboxes look like as well, right? All of these emails that you need to get to. How do you actually decide what to do? what do readers actually do when they have this full inbox of emails sitting for them? There's a study done a few years back, and they actually looked at this very thing. What was the first thing that people would look at to make the decision for them to actually open the email? What they found was 42% of people look to see who the email is from first. So how can you actually get, prevent from getting deleted or ignored in the inbox? Let me show you some experiments. Here's one. You can see on the control on the left, the sender was from competitive enterprise, and we built a treatment that was from a person. You can see here on mobile. And what we found is when we sent it from a person, we saw a 28% increase in opens. Another example, we have two different senders here. The difference between the two is that the person on the left was the founder of the organization, and the person on the right is just another user of that site. And what we found with this one is by sending it from a different sender than is normally sent to people, there's a 137% increase in opens. Or this one. Again, this one is using two people are sending it, but there's a small difference. You can see that in the control. The control is from a person, comma, the organization's name, where the treatment was just from the person. We saw an 18% increase in opens. So what are actually nonprofits doing? This was a question that we had. We've been doing a ton of testing to try and increase open rates, but we were curious what the nonprofit space was actually doing. So we did a research study. Again, Nathan had mentioned we'll get you access to all of this after the webinar, so you have it. And we analyzed over 199 organizations to look at their email cultivation. And part of that research, we analyzed the email in the email envelope. And what we found is that 74% of emails were sent from the organization only. You can see that here in the inbox. We also saw that only 17% of all emails were sent from a person, comma, the organization's name. And even more, we said 9% of all emails that were sent through this study were sent from just a person. You can see that throughout here, a name sprinkled in throughout. You see, we know that an email generally performs better when it appears to be from a realistic representative, a person, right? Not a collective, not a group. What we need to focus on is to send your emails from a real person and not a brand. How can we actually make a person feel that they're not being marketed to, but communicated with? This is so critical, right? It goes back to that whole people give to people, not email marketing machines. So why are we sending from an organization, or do we feel like we need to use the organization's name within the subject line? This comment about being marketed to versus communicated with actually reminded me of a note I received from my 6-year-old. As you know, we've talked already about quarantine and doing school from home, and I'm sure you've experienced some of this if you have kids at home, but not all of quarantine has been particularly awesome, especially when we were doing school at home. And one day we had a particularly difficult day, and I received this note. It says, he's in kindergarten, he's just learning to write. It says, "I am sorry, Mom," and I received $11. So I got this apology note after we had a pretty tough day with $11 left behind. And I mean, truly very clever. I have to give him that. Very, very clever to leave some money behind for me as an apology note. I didn't pick up the money. I didn't say anything to him. It was kind of quiet all day. And then I got another note on my pillow before I went to bed. And it said this: "Mom, I'm sorry. I love you. XOXOXO." I was being communicated with, not marketed to. There wasn't some ploy to have forgiveness come. And I think that this was a great example to show that human connection. Don't just throw money at me or show me your gimmicks and think that I want to connect with you. Let's talk to people like we care about them, like they're real people that we have a relationship with. So I do want to ask you this, what do your emails look and feel like that we're sending to people? Do they look like an actual Outlook email that you would send a colleague or a friend? Or are we simply just like blasting people with our email marketing and hoping that they'll catch them, hoping that they'll open them and respond? Again, I want to encourage you to look something more like this rather than to be this email blast that you're sending out. So let's take a look at some experiments to kind of talk through this even a little bit more. We talked about the email envelope, but now drilling down into the tone and the messaging and the content of our emails, what does that look like? This was a very actually real life experiment that we ran. Our team was overseas doing a workshop actually on email messaging, email marketing. There was a crisis in Yemen and they needed to send out an emergency email. And this was what they were going to be sending out literally within hours because of the attacks that were happening nearby. And because our team was there and they were doing a crisis response, we said, why don't we just try and send out what we just learned, which is this treatment email. Again, it's ugly. It doesn't have any bells and whistles and beautiful images. It doesn't have buttons, but it's from a person. It looks like it's from a person. And what happened was that they saw a 300% increase in donations. Let's take a look at another one. This is from Caring Bridge. You can see them side by side here, the control and the treatment. And there's subtle differences. And what we had from this experiment was 145% increase in donations. When we look closely at it, I want to highlight some of these differences because, again, at face value, you're like, they look the same. There's maybe two instances where there's adjustments, but let's take a look. First, the logo placement. The control had the logo at the very top, where the treatment had placed it towards the bottom, making it less of an emphasis. Next, at the beginning of the email, we make it very personal, a very relevant communication. We say, I know you've been using the site to stay connected with your loved ones, and I hope it's been a source of strength for you. Then it continues on into additional body copy. We sound even more human when we're actually talking about the campaign. Then it's really written for you. Notice this, in the control, the word you or your in the first two paragraphs was used once. In the treatment, we used it 5 times. Again, we need to communicate to the person. This is about them and not us. And then in the call to action, you can see there's clarity in it. In the control, we said you can make sure Caring Bridge is here for them, and we hyperlinked it. We're assuming that people know to click that and make a gift without actually asking them to make a gift. So in the treatment, you can see there that we said, click here to have your gift matched today. And then in the additional CTA, instead of the big button, we just kept the text link as well. You can even see a small difference in the salutation at the end. We just reinforced the value proposition on the treatment and appreciated them as for supporting the cause. Again, all of these things resulted in this 145% increase in donations. And why? Because it sounds more human. It feels authentic. It's a conversation with that person about them and not focused on the organization itself. So a lot of times we get the question, well, what about design? You know, you've seen a lot of these like stripped down emails and they're really plain and simple. And we say, you know, which one is correct? Should we do it this way or this way or this way? And this is really the wrong question to be asking. Really what we should be asking is, you know, how does the email actually affect people? How are they responding to it? And that's why we test. I can show you all of these examples and experiments, but I encourage you to do your own testing. This is, again, based on everything that we have learned through the testing and data that we have. And what we know is that people give to people. So from a design perspective, we do strip it down. We make it look more plain text, but the design has to affect the people. So in email, people do prioritize messages that appear to be personally written. So to create more effective emails, the thing that we need to do that we've talked about through this whole big introduction is that we need to humanize email. We need to make it personal. And so as we're building these welcome series, this is at the foundation of what you need to examine before you go in and build these series. When you look at a welcome series, we really look at them with two lenses. We have like a subscriber series and then a new donor welcome series. Now, today we're going to really tackle just the new subscriber welcome series. I do want to just put a little plug in. We are having a virtual summit later this fall. You may have even heard about it, but we'll be covering both of these in depth during that summit, and I invite you to be a part of that because we'll be talking through the new donor series then. But let's start with the new subscriber. That's what we're all here for. So what is this new subscriber, new name welcome series? Well, after someone signs up for something on your website, maybe it's an ebook or a newsletter or an online course, they click that button to get the thing that they asked for, and they're now on our email file. They're ours. So what do we do with that? That's what we're talking about. What is this series that happens afterwards? Well, let me first show you what we learned within the nonprofit space through this email cultivation study. I did mention this a little bit earlier about looking at 199 nonprofits across 12 verticals. But what we actually did was analyze over 2,500 emails where we classified them into different categories. We actually looked at the communication from these organizations over a 45-day window. And we looked at it from two lenses, as I just talked about, the subscriber and the donor. Often we get asked, like, why do you choose 45 days? What's that magic number? We know that that allows for that full communication cycle to happen. So we can actually see what people are sending, what the messages are, and do our analysis from there. And in the study, what we found was that 46% of respondents said that they only sent one email or less each month. Another fascinating response is that only 52% of nonprofits sent a clear confirmation email on the sign up or cultivation email within the first 2 days. I wish we were in person. I'm so curious on what camps you all fall into and where you're at in these percentages. Another really interesting fact that we found was that 74% of respondents did not have or didn't know if they had a welcome series. That blows my mind because what we know to be true is this. Through data, we know that welcome series is one of the greatest opportunities for conversion to happen because engagement metrics are truly at their highest, from the open rate to the click rate to the response rate. Across the board, you can see that they're much higher than any NPO benchmark out there. We know this because the first emails that you send are truly some of the most opened and read that you'll actually ever send. So we've got to get this right. So what does the subscriber welcome series look like? Well, I just laid out a couple of examples on how you could position your welcome series. Again, these really do change kind of organization to organization, but hopefully this gives you at least a template to work from as you think about how to create a welcome series or maybe fine tune the welcome series that you have. So once a new subscriber comes onto your file, the first thing that we need to do is truly welcome them and align our beliefs with theirs. They came onto your file for a reason, not just because they wanted something free or gimmicky. They believe something connected with them, and whatever that connection is, we need to align that belief with theirs. Next, you would want to send them continued cultivation. This is all about fostering this relationship, right? So getting them links and resources, getting them plugged into content on your site. What are some things that would that they would find value in or benefit from? Another email to send would be an actual resource, an actual free resource saying, hey, we have this great ebook around this topic. I thought you would, benefit from it. Here's a link to that. So an ebook, a video series, an article, a podcast, I'm sure you have content out there. It's why you're an organization providing value to others. And so repurpose that content and create something that you can give to people. Another great opportunity is to provide the opportunity to get a response from people. If you think about communication between people, and we're trying to humanize email, it's not a one-way street. You have a conversation with someone, it's two-sided. You're asking questions, they're responding, and so on and so forth. So we do encourage like looking at this response opportunity, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but how that works, what that looks like, and give you some examples as well. And then finally, provide a solicitation or a donation ask. The primary objective of a new welcome series is not that donation. It's truly to cultivate this new name on your file. But we do need to provide an opportunity for a donation ask. If we don't ask, they're not going to give. So we do need to ask, but we need to cultivate them first and then present that ask opportunity within the right kind of time frame. So when you look at this on a calendar, this is a typical welcome series that I usually build. Is usually that those first 5 initial emails are delivered within the first 2 to 3 weeks. Again, think about this kind of 45-day time frame that people's communication, the cycle is going through. So the first one should be automated, should go out right away, align with their beliefs. The next one should be about 3 days later or so. The next ebook or content offer could be 3 more days later, 3 to 5 days later for the response opportunity, and 5 days later for that solicitation or ask. Again, there's no necessarily magic number for that time frame, but what we do know is that we want to deliver those emails within a tighter time frame because they are at their highest engagement. Remember the slide I just went through about the open rates and the click-through rates and the response rates? They're on this high from signing up through your website to get something from you. And they're interested in your cause. So while it's hot, let's get in their inbox and connect with them and provide some of these opportunities for them. And so that's really the nature behind the timeline between this, is to try and get it in their inbox quickly over that 2 to 3 week window. And then what I don't want to leave out is this ongoing cultivation, whether that's articles or blogs or newsletters. That communication, once the initial welcome series is over, should not stop. And in that study that I've been referencing shows really great examples of what happens when you increase cultivation to your file. Not only do you have a healthier email file, but you see that response rate improve and increase across the board from a donor conversion and revenue standpoint. So continue that cultivation. That intentional personal cultivation needs to continue. And what's important about that too is you don't want to write this welcome series that is incredibly personal and connecting with them as a human, and then drop off and go to completely marketing and branded and going back to kind of organization centric. That relationship needs to continue throughout the year. And whether that's once a month or once every week, whatever you want to start with, I just say start somewhere, send cultivation ongoing after the initial welcome series. So what are the goals of a subscriber series? We've talked a little bit about this already. I've kind of hinted at some of them, but I'm going to walk you through really 5 goals of a subscriber series. Number 1, we need to foster a relationship with the new subscriber. That is number 1 across the board. We have to create a relationship. It's not about giving immediately. We're not going to want to put a donate button or donate links in an email right away. We need to create an authentic relationship. We need to embrace our new friends who have come on our file. We need to be conversational and relational. And you can see some examples here of how you can achieve that. You can say hello and use their first name. This is also why we talk about, in an email acquisition workshop that we've done before, is We encourage to ask for first name, last name, and email address because a first name is so important to address someone when you're sending emails to them. And then even an opening line that says, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to personally thank you for connecting with us. It goes on to talk about the organization and says, it's our joy and our privilege to share, to share this all with you. These are examples that only scratch the surface of what we do. We want to actually help you grow and get connected with us more. Here's a link to our Facebook page, our website. Again, it's connecting with them on a very personal level. Here's another example, again, hello, using their first name. We actually try and connect with them as a person. We said, whether your family is really healthy right now and strong, or maybe you're experiencing tough times, we want to help you. That's at the heart of who we are, because we know that family is so important. God loves your family, and so do we. Again, connecting with them on a very real level. Again, of course, these examples are very specific to these organizations, but you get the idea behind some of these. I'm gonna give you another one here. This one, actually, the first email provided a video for people, but at the end, at the very bottom, it's a little hard to read, but it says, if there's anything I can do to help you get connected with our ministry, either find out more or volunteer, would you please reply and let me know? I hope you have a great day. Again, conversational, relational. It needs to be about how we can connect with them, how we can help them get connected with our organization. Number 2, align our beliefs with theirs. They've connected with us for a certain reason, right? We know that they connect with us on some belief, on some level. So call it out. And you can see here in this example, it says, I wanted to personally thank you for connecting with us. It's always such an encouragement to meet like-minded people who share the same desire. Here's another example. It says, you care. This is already so clear from your interest in the work that we do. Your heart is moved by the plight of children. It matters to you that these things are happening. And in the face of injustice, it's hard for you to sit still because it's not okay. And guess what? We feel the same way. It's aligning those beliefs. It's identifying why they came on your file and understanding, like, we get each other, right? But we get each other. So call that out so that they feel connected to you in that way. Third, provide value to the new subscriber. Before I get into some examples of this, I also want to highlight something about the intent of the emails that we're sending. So this is an example of an email that we received. You can see it here. It's pretty long. It was probably a little bit more of a newsletter, but it was part of their welcome series. And when I look at this email, what I see is a couple things. It has this video at the top explaining what the organization does. Then they thank them for signing up, provides a link to an article, but it's actually not, it was to their website. And then it has additional opportunities. There's information about a program for kids, or maybe you want to become a volunteer. And of course, there's always ways to give. And so when I look at this email, I'm confused on what we're trying to achieve with it. Is this a confirmation of my email sign up? Is it cultivation? Is it solicitation? We have to make it clear to people so that they know what our intent is. Should I volunteer? Is this a newsletter? Should I get the newsletter? We have to be clear with the purpose of our call to action in our emails. What's the one thing we want them to do out of that email? And that should be the call to action. And everything in the email itself should move people towards that one call to action. So as we look at providing value to people in the form of content, here's a great example. Again, it's focused on the one thing. Hey, we've got this ebook on this topic. I thought that you would like it. It's going to do this for you. Just click here to get this free ebook, and it has a raw link to it. Another example is this. It talks about, hey, we were inspired. I know that you're inspired of those in desperate need. We want to equip you in order to get that. This ebook is going to achieve these 4 things. Here's a link to that free ebook. Again, all signs, all calls to action point to the one thing we want them to do. And finally, here's another example. This organization provided phone wallpapers. And it says, looking for a daily reminder of the powerful, inspiring work you're doing through Operation Smile. We thought you might like these generous cell phone wallpapers. And then it talks about the wallpapers. And I think what the important part is too, is that when we're providing value and free content to people, it's not just to, again, provide like gimmicky things. These are things that need to connect with your organization of who you are. So this email then went on to talk about the wallpapers and about the images that they're going to see, and it reinforced the work that this organization is doing. Number 4, we want to encourage interaction. I'm going to ask you this question. How are we actually measuring email marketing success? Most likely, you're looking at it through the lens of open rates, click rates, maybe these 8 other marketing success metrics. These are all really great metrics to look at and to consider an email marketing piece success or not. But it's also, these aren't, the only success metrics. And let me show you what I mean by that. This was an organization that we work with. It was their email welcome series. We're continuing to look at their response and the metrics within the welcome series to see how it's performing. So we're looking at their open rate and their click rate. As I'm looking at the data, I noticed email 4 and I thought, oh, we've got to change email 4. That click rate is not healthy comparatively to the others. And so before we actually started writing the copy to rework email 4. But in the meantime, I said, well, let me look at email 4 to actually see what we said in that email. I can't remember. So as I'm going through the content, I noticed that there's actually no opportunity to click a link. Instead, it says, just send a quick reply back to us with your prayer request. This was a faith-based organization. And so instead of providing an opportunity to click on something in this email, the primary purpose of this email was to engage them and encourage interaction. We're asking them to communicate back to us. And what we found was that that email that had a 0.3% click rate actually had over 2,200 reply backs with prayer requests from that email. So of course, I threw out the idea of getting rid of that email because this was actually a very, very well performing email from a email marketing metric that is not typically measured. And in fact, I might go as far to say that this is probably one of the greatest marketing metrics that we could look at over open rates and click rates because they're engaging with us on a personal level. So again, as we think about encouraging response, this is a great way to connect with people. I'll even show, we've done this with our own company with Next After. We were doing a webinar. You can see the control on the left. And we did a treatment that said, so the control had a link and asked people to sign up for the webinar, similar to where you're at today. And then we developed this treatment that said, hey, I didn't see your name on the list. When I checked today, do you want me to send a recording of it instead? Will you just let me know? Reply back, let me know. And we saw a 25% increase in registrants. See, we're even testing things on you and you don't even know it maybe. So again, you can provide these opportunities to reply back in many different ways. I'll show you some more examples. So another way to kind of connect with people as far as asking them a question, you could say, I'm sending you all of these articles. I find them very interesting, but I want to make sure that it's helpful for you. I always appreciate when a friend shares this kind of content with me, but do you find it beneficial? I'd love to know what you think and encourage this response back. Again, are we communicating with you okay? Are we good? Encouraging that reply back. Another example is this organization had a series of emails that went out and there's a lot of reply back responses within it. And they started getting concerned that they weren't able to respond to people in a very timely manner because their email inboxes were flooded with responses from people. And they said, they actually call it out in this email, please give us a few days to get back to your questions. You can communicate that with people. You can be transparent with your readers. And I think this is a great example of how they did that. Another idea is to take a survey, ask people's responses, whether that's to have them reply back or even just take a survey and have a link and encourage them to reply back that they took the survey or that they found it interesting. Again, encourage that engagement and interaction with your organization. Specifically, encourage that interaction with the sender of the email. And the fifth thing is to make a donation ask. In the study that we had done through email cultivation, we 58% of nonprofits made a donation ask to email subscribers within the first 45 days. It makes me ask, like, what else are people sending in that? And so as we look at how to do this, I want to show some examples of how you can actually present the donation ask. One is to reinforce the value proposition. You can communicate why they should make a gift at the very beginning of your email, but it needs to be backed by what we call evidentials. You say that you're so great at this thing. Can you show, can we prove to them with data that we are? So for instance, we talked about this online course with this organization that we want to find people to support this online course. And then later on, we say, hey, did you realize that over 200,000 people have signed up for this online course already? And that we actually need people like you to continue to get people signed up for this. We need your support. Here's another example of an organization about value proposition reinforce. You can say, Greenpeace has this welcome email, and they talk about being having this global presence. And so they're using data. They say more than 1 million Greenpeace change agents have taken action around the world. They talk about this problem that they're trying to raise money for. And then they go back in and say, guess what? There's good news, and that is that it's working. And they provide very evidentials of how they are actually actively working to show people what their gift is doing. In addition to value proposition being reinforced in your appeal, I'd also encourage you to think about communicating what the gift will actually provide. So if you're going to say, will you make a gift towards XYZ organization, tell me what it's going to actually do. This was a great example, I thought, where they said that it takes just $45 a day to provide housing, counseling, and support for people, foster children in need. Another example of this is within this organization. They said, we found that this assessment is really helpful. And when you make a gift, you're going to provide these very specific resources to more people like you all over the nation. Another thing we must think about or something to consider as you're looking at doing a solicitation in your email is that you can provide a special incentive. Sometimes that's in the form of a match, or maybe a giving challenge, or a specific campaign. Or you can also look at sending them an incentive along the lines of a premium gift. So when you make a gift to this organization, you're helping to achieve all of these things, and we want to thank you and send you this special gift. Again, I would say that these are great things to test into, and that's one thing that I have learned with Welcome Series is that as much as a Welcome Series is kind of a set it and forget it, it's a set it and forget it for time being. And then it's going back, evaluating how it's performing. And most of the time, the email that needs the most work and the most love is that appeal. It's trying to find that motivation and within the new subscriber to convert them into a donor. And so some of these tactics, whether it's the incentive of a gift or a match, those are good things to, I think, test into as you develop your Welcome Series. So we've talked a lot about these principles. I've given a couple of examples of how they look and feel with some very specific organizations, but I want to show you actually what happens when you combine all of these principles together. We work with an organization who has a lot of Welcome Series for different segments of their audience, for different verticals within their organization. And this was one that focused around marriages and families. And this was their overwhelming welcome series. It's a little bit of an eyesore, but you don't need to see the content to get the point. But you can see here, it had 7 emails in the series. And we looked at this, we kind of went through all of the content, the way that it was being communicated, the headers, the footers, the buttons, all of the images, all of the call to actions that there were. And we said, what if we just completely change this and apply all of the principles that we've just talked through today to look something more like this? Again, plain, ugly, but guess what? It's personal, it's relational. It connects with people as a human. And throughout the copy, there's one call to action, limited images, connecting with people on a very human level. You can see even some of the emails had reply back opportunities. Of course, a direct donation ask. And you can see that here a little bit closer up. We stripped down the email to be more Outlook style, relational and conversational. Again, it says, hello, Kristen, I hope this finds you well. It goes into aligning their beliefs with ours, knowing that what they're going through is something that we care about and we're here to help them. We're providing value to them, talking about throughout the series, we gave them digital resources and phone numbers to counseling centers and things like that. You'll notice and throughout the whole series, we had one single call to action. When I was looking at some of the emails in the series, I found that some of the emails had 7 to 8 call to actions, and it just causes people to not know where and what they should click. So again, making the email about the one thing. And then it's from a person as well and not the organization. We encourage reply backs throughout the series, and we had very specific donation asks. And so when you look at them side by side, again, this was a whole series that we had tested. You can kind of see them here, one very specific email. But as a whole, throughout the series, by changing all of them, we increased opens by 33%, clicks by 42%, donations by 875%, and revenue by 99%. Not to mention the over 1,500 responses we received from the personal reply back encouragement emails. So all of this to say, I just want to ask you and challenge you as you're thinking through how to build a welcome series, or as you're reviewing your own welcome series, is this series about the end reader, or is it about the organization? Are we fostering a relationship with our readers? Are we intentional about what we're saying? Are we trying to connect with them on a human level? Are we aligning our beliefs? Are we, referencing, we know why they connected with us, because guess what? We care about that thing too. Are we providing value for them? Are we giving them content, ebooks and articles and podcasts, and you name it, you have content, let's get it to them. Are we encouraging interaction, whether that's a reply back or a survey, asking people's opinions, being there for them for whatever they're going through? Are we asking them to make a gift at the very end? So again, I encourage you to look at this, through the lens of your own welcome series. And are you achieving these things? And if you're not, I would encourage you to try some of these things. The tough thing about welcome series is this, and we get this asked a lot, is that there's not an email platform that really allows you to do an A/B split test between a full series. And so the way that we've tested this in the past is we run it for usually like a 2 to 3 month window, depending on the sample size, the amount of people going through the welcome series. We turn it off and turn on the new series, run it for a few months, the same amount of time, get the same data set, so that we can analyze which one is performing best. That's where we kind of do the radical take, but then we've also gone in and maybe just swapped out one of the appeals or donation emails. So again, test into it. It's not a direct A/B split test, but you will see as you make tweaks, those engagement metrics that define the success of your series will show. Nathan, I'm going to bring you back in to get questions here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Courtney. This is awesome. And it's really fun to watch the chat and see, how many people are just jumping in with their own thoughts and commentary and questions and ideas and all of that. So we've got a bunch of questions to go through. If you have additional questions, feel free to keep putting those in the chat. I'll try to watch those and we'll try to respond to those. A couple things, or really just, two things before we jump into questions. We'll give you some time to put those in the chat. The first one, again, is we have this email workshop coming up on August 5th. So if you are interested in what you've seen here, especially this idea of how do you build one of these emails and people give to people, all of that, we're going to go really deep looking at every single one of the different aspects of your email. We're going to look at how do you actually grow your email file, because you can send an amazing email, but if you send it to like 5 people, you're not going to see a lot of results. So how do you actually increase that? And then additionally, you can have a great email, but if you land on a donation page, but the donation page isn't optimized, you're not going to see great revenue results too. So we'll talk about the donation page and the email and how to grow the file and everything. You can find more info about that at nextchapter.com/virtual workshop. And then this slide in front of you as well. You are the lucky winners of being the first ones to see this brand new ebook on email fundraising. It's really a quick reference guide. It's about 10 pages. That's going to walk you through really 9 questions that you can ask as you're putting one of these appeals together, a fundraising appeal. Things that you can ask to make sure that your email is as optimized as possible by just asking a couple of questions to get you not just more clicks and opens, but actually more revenue and more donations. So you can get this free guide at nextchapter.com/email guide. Now, we have a bunch of questions, and I'm going to pull some of these up. And so, Courtney, be ready. I think I have about 12 already, and there's more coming in. So we're going to start at the very beginning here. A question from Cassie. I think this is one of her hopes coming into this webinar is how do I, understanding, is it beneficial to have a new subscriber series and a new donor series? In fact, this question came up from several different people, some who are hoping you would dive into the new donor series and not just the email welcome series, which I totally get. We don't have time for both. So I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about a new donor series. Do these same types of principles apply? Are there, specific tactics that you might recommend someone test or try out in a new donor series? So just give us the high level overview. How is a new donor series different?
Sure. So number one is new subscriber series and new donor series should be radically different because the motivation and engagement of that person is very different. The same principles apply in the fact that we want to connect with them as a human. So everything that we talked and taught about today about, humanizing our emails, that all stays intact. But the approach that you take with a new donor series is much different. We know that they've already made a gift to the organization. And so instead of needing to kind of tell them in depth about who we are and really, really aligning our beliefs with theirs, we actually need to celebrate the donor. That's actually what I wish actually the new donor series was called, like a celebration series, because that's the way I view it. I really do. I when I teach on the new donor series, the very first thing I say is we need to celebrate the donor. It needs to be talking about, hey, you're amazing, you're awesome, you just gave to our organization for this cause to help achieve these things. You could have invested your money in so many other places, but guess what? You decided to invest in this, and we are so grateful. So that's the tone that needs to come across from a new donor series. And throughout that series, you want to continue to kind of remind them of the impact that they're having. Maybe you share a testimonial to kind of drive home the fact of what their dollars are actually being put towards and the impact that it's having. There is a similar principle that could apply from the new subscriber to the new donor is we still want to, kind of feed into them and foster that relationship. So providing value to them, I absolutely would encourage, what else can we give them? We know that they gave to XYZ cause or something very specific. Can we give them content around that to either equip them or encourage them or inform and educate them on that thing? And then again, that encourage interaction. If they have given to you, these people should be highly valuable to you. And so that interaction needs to definitely continue to happen. And then at the very end, we know that within that first 45-day window is the greatest opportunity to convert them as a second donor or have them become a recurring donor. So You also, similar tactic of presenting that donation ask is to present a second gift ask or a recurring gift ask at that point. Again, not for the sake of just asking for it, but reinforcing the value prop, knowing what we know about them, that they gave to this very specific cause for this very specific reason. Surely, a great kind of launch off of that is, we know that you believe in these things. Did you realize that you can actually, do this 365 days a year or every single month of the year? Would you consider giving, to us on an ongoing basis or something like that? So that's in a nutshell, in a 2-minute little synopsis of what the new donor series should look like. But it has to be about celebration. And when I talked about the new subscribers series being about them, the new donor series needs to be even more about them and what they're actually helping to achieve.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. And obviously, you can go way deeper on a
Yes.
new donor series and talk about, so much data and examples and all of that stuff. So we'll have to do a separate webinar at some point to dive into that. And then, as Courtney mentioned, we do have our annual conference called the NEO Summit. Is actually going to be virtual this year. It's at the end of September. We're still finalizing some of the details, but that will be one of the sessions during that summit. So stay tuned. We'll keep you posted about that. Here's a question from Annalise. She's saying that someone on their staff, I'm assuming probably the one who's writing the emails here, someone on our staff believes that putting our names, so actually using a human sender rather than the organization, leads to more spam notices. She says that they have an older donor base. Does this make sense? Do we see that with organizations that you're working with? What are your thoughts there?
Sure. I actually would say that we see opposite of that. And I would encourage to get data behind that comment. Of course, we always, whenever there's a discussion or usually like an opinion from people, is like, let's look at the data and see what the data is telling us. And so what I can tell you is through our data is that we've actually found that opposite because when it's from a person, it looks, again, real, relevant, like a human connection. Like I'm personally sending you an email versus a big mass marketing email coming across. So we actually have seen that to be opposite of what you're referring to.
In addition to that, I think it was with the study we did with Salesforce and recurring giving. There was some of the data we were looking at as we were analyzing all the emails that were coming into our inbox, and we're looking at people that I think it was about 150 organizations, something like that,
Sure.
and we signed up as like a single donor, as like an email subscriber, as well as a recurring donor. Tracked all the email communication coming in, and overwhelmingly so, the emails that made it to the primary tab, especially in like Gmail.
Sure.
Were sent from human beings, and then overwhelmingly so the ones that hit the promotions folder or the junk or the spam folder were all ones sent from an organization or from a no reply email address or something like that. So
yeah.
the data that we have suggests pretty heavily that a human sender is most likely to make it to the main inbox.
Right. Yeah. From a deliverability and an inboxing standpoint, definitely human is better.
Yeah. Cool. Let's jump to the next question from Maytal. I hope I said that right. They're asking, does the increase in open rates that you're seeing, I think it was from an experiment you showed at the beginning, where you saw an increase in open rate using the first name.
Sure.
Does it actually have an impact downstream on revenue and donations?
I'd have to go back and actually look at that very specific experiment. We have looked at that though in the past. Of course, we always ask when we're going into testing, what's the primary metric we're trying to measure? And then we pull the data based off of that. Sometimes we'll look at, because the sender part is so high up in the funnel of the conversion funnel, to kind of draw the direct correlation with that, it is a little bit more challenging to validate those results. But again, it kind of goes back to that if Nathan is asking me to take an action versus an organization, I'm much more likely to give. And actually, a great example is with that NPR example, they saw an increase in clicks with the template being different, but an increase in donations. And so throughout those metrics along the way, you might see differences, like maybe you'll see a higher click from the organization, but then when it comes down to the final action that you want, most of the time, again, I'd have to like pull very specific examples, and maybe Nathan, you have some in mind, and I can look as well where we've actually tracked it all the way down, from start to finish. But most of the time, yes. I mean, that's the whole intent and reason why we would encourage that. I wouldn't want you just to get an increase in opens if it didn't result in more donations and revenue.
Yeah. Personally, I don't care if you get more opens if it's not actually
Right.
leading to donations and the metrics that matter to you. Then who cares? So
right.
Yeah, that's great. And we do dive deeper in that actual workshop into some more examples that show how it can affect downstream metrics.
Awesome.
And all that stuff. So
perfect.
Awesome. Here's a question from Kay, and it's a really good question. Do people start to ignore human senders also if you are sending from the same person over and over? Like, is this still only going to work for like 2 weeks or maybe a month? And then you figure out the gimmick?
Solid, great question. We do get this question quite a bit. I'm going to speak to it from a couple of different places. So there's a couple of things that you can actually look at doing and to keep in mind. As you send from a person, I would encourage you, let's say that Nathan is always sending me emails and they're always donation asks. Nathan should not always and only ever send me just donation asks. He needs to send cultivation and a myriad of content so that people's names, just as organizations do, get flagged of like, oh, so-and-so organization is just going to ask me for money, versus, oh, Nathan might be sending me another great article like he sent me last week. So I would just encourage you to think about what you're sending from those senders versus, like the focus being around that you're sending from them too often. That said, you can always add another sender into the mix. This is something that I've continued to do with a couple of organizations. They have kind of like one primary sender, again, sending a variety of both appeals and cultivation. But then I also have another sender who's sending additional cultivation, or maybe it's a special appeal that they'll send. So you can always introduce another sender. And what I try and do though with that, at least what I've seen to work well over the past few years, is to not introduce too many senders into the mix. But, I would encourage you to try another sender just to see what kind of response you get. There is going to be a novelty effect from that new sender. I will say that. So if you send, all of a sudden you start hearing from me instead of Nathan, of course you're going to see a spike in opens. And I don't want you to just kind of like put all your eggs in that basket of the new person, because there's some novelty effect to that. So finding that balance between your senders, but making sure that you don't just have one person send appeals, one person send cultivation, because they will get ignored based on the content they're sending.
That's great. Thank you, Courtney. We've got a bunch more questions. I know it's after 2 o'clock. It's like 2:03, so we're 3 minutes late technically. If you can stick around for a little bit, especially if you've asked a question, we're going to try to answer as many of these as we can. We'll sort of have a hard stop around 2:15, so in about 12 minutes from now. But Courtney, let's try to go rapid fire through some of these.
Okay.
This next one we could get hung up on forever, because this actually comes from, his name is Jacob, and he works at the same organization that you and I both used to work at. In fact, has the same job that you and I both have previously held. So this is fun. I have 2 questions from Jacob. I assume they're the same Jacob. One is asking, when I receive emails, they look like Outlook emails. Sometimes they're confusing, like if they are marketing, because they often don't include stuff like the unsubscribe and all the required stuff you need in the footer. Are you suggesting that we should remove those, or is there a way you can still insert that into this more personalized style?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually it actually is required to include the unsubscribe link. So whatever Outlook emails you're receiving from whoever that organization is, I would just say that that's probably not good, because you do need to legal. So you do need to I'm not a lawyer. I should make sure I say that. But unsubscribe links do need to be included in your footer. They're required. In fact, there's some email platforms that won't even let you send the email without having it present. And so you can have it in there. I think it's just a matter of how it's presented. A lot of times it's like a button, or it's like big. Some tactics that we use is actually, with that footer information that is required, is that we'll kind of fool the email itself, in that we'll write our content and our message here, have the signer, and then we'll put maybe like 5 to 10 spaces, and then the footer is there present, so that the footer is still present on the page. People can still unsubscribe, but it's not necessarily like bold, glaring in their face. But it is required. So
it is definitely required. Okay, so I'll jump into Jacob's other question here. And Jacob, you and I can go deep and talk about this over email too. So feel free to shoot me an email, and we can chat there. Right. But he's wondering, he's saying our organization has like 5 different divisions, and you know this because we both have worked there. They have like 5 different divisions, and everybody's wanting to send to everyone.
Sure.
But if I'm the subscriber, I haven't necessarily opted in to division number 2. I opted into division number 3. So sure. How do you handle that, especially if you have, higher level people involved that are wanting to say like, hey, we've got these emails, we just need to blast them.
Sure.
Any quick tips? Obviously we could talk forever about it, but any quick tips?
Yeah, this is an hour-long webinar itself. I mean, I think that you have to be mindful of what people signed up for, right? Like if I signed up for division category 2, and you're gonna send me things from everyone, I would just say to limit that as much as you can. Is it good? Yes, because it's always good to kind of give them a full breadth of your organization and what you do, because they might want to connect in those other parts of the organization. But the main kind of like communications stream should really be from the thing, the vertical that they signed up through. So
it's great. Thanks, Courtney. And then, yeah, Jacob, feel free to shoot me an email. We can talk a whole lot more about it. It'd be fun to catch up and kind of see what y'all are doing. So a question from Kyle. Kyle's wondering, there are some experiments you showed where there are like a lot of variables changing. So you went from a heavily designed email to a plain text style email, but the copy was also different. Have we ever run an A/B test where you have the same exact copy and you've just removed the design? And if so, what's the result?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's hard. I think we have, 2,200 experiments in our library somewhere. Tell me, you know the exact number, probably, Nathan.
Over 2,500, Courtney.
25. Whoa. So we have over 2,500 experiments in our library, and so we try and show the best example to drive home, the principle. But yes, there's some experiments where we do a more radical test, and that's probably what you're referring to. And they get these great lifts. And then there's other experiments where we actually hone in on like one single thing that we're testing so that we can get clarity. And sometimes what I do is actually I'll do a radical at first to see the impact, to kind of get this like great response and get an impact. And then I'll kind of go back to the drawing board and dissect it one by one so that I can know exactly the motivation or where that motivating factor is, or maybe friction point is within the conversion pathway. So whether that's the envelope and all of the different elements in the envelope, or the salutation, or the body copy, or the link, or the footer, all of those things you can test back into, and time again, the principles that we talked about today are true when we have isolated them down into testing them individually.
Great, thanks, Court. And Kyle, if you want to go deeper on A/B testing, we do have a course on the whole topic that talks about like multivariate testing and how you can change multiple things at once, as long as you have it kind of wrapped up in a central hypothesis, and we can go deep on it. So if that's interesting, feel free to check out that course.
Great.
Question we talked about this one from Cassie. This is a quick one. Additional question about a new donor series from Cassie. So if you have a welcome series or an email welcome series, new subscriber series, I'll call it that. For the sake of clarity, new subscriber series versus new donor series. You have them both. Someone's in your new subscriber series, and then they donate. Do they now start getting both at the same time? What do you do? Is there a particular
Great question.
way to handle that?
Yeah, ideally, and again, I know it can be very complicated with whatever systems that you have and platforms that you're using. Ideally, once someone is in the new subscriber series, and at any point that they give, they should be taken out of that series and placed into the new donor series. Because as you know, like in the new subscriber series, it's very, it's very thought out. We're kind of walking them through the process. And if they just gave a gift on Monday and on Friday, they're going to get the appeal in the new subscriber series, it's not a great experience for them. And so if we can pull them out and put them into that next series, again, I know platforms and all of that can be challenging sometimes, but as much as you can, if you can automate that, do it.
Awesome. Any quick hacks for how to do this in MailChimp? A question from Rachel is saying, it seems like if you're on more of a smaller plan, they have limitations on the amount of automated emails. Have you seen that, or do you know of any quick ways to get around that?
It's like, I'm sorry to tell you, it's going to be a manual process. I'm going to get it to you straight. It's a manual process. We do have a couple of organizations who use MailChimp, so we're very familiar with it. And so what we do with that, with platforms that we have to do a more manual process, we actually increase the amount of time between our emails so that we can do that kind of manual check every once in a while. And so it is a manual check. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that is maybe a tactic to do is, instead of 3 days, maybe you make it 5 to 7 or something. That gives you enough time to do a check. And what I would say to that too is that a person might make a gift online during that time, but the only donation ask that happens within the series is, well, at least in the one that I identified, is at the end. And so there shouldn't be too much of that happening throughout, unless you have maybe a more robust series. And hopefully if you have a more robust series, you have a more robust platform.
Sounds like that's key. Cool, thank you. That's helpful. Hopefully that's helpful for you, Cassie and Rachel. A question from Tim, not our. I
was like, Tim?
Different Tim. Tim A, I believe. Tim is wondering, how do you get people to take surveys? It sounds like they've sent some surveys out and just not seen great response. So how do you? Man,
I mean, people love surveys. So I would honestly, I would love to even see what your surveys look like. I think it truly is the approach that you take with it. I just was talking with an organization about this week. They sent over this survey and they're like, we want to send this to our listeners or to our file. It was a radio station. and I read it and it was like, the purpose of that survey was truly organization centric. And so as a person, I'm not as likely to fill out a survey that's going to just like, be truly all about you and focused on that. But if we can present it, the way that we present it is really the hook. And so we reworked that email to be like, hey, we'd love to get your thoughts on this. We know that you care about X, Y, Z. It's just going to take you 5 minutes. Your feedback will help us to do X, Y, and Z. And so a lot of the time, I don't know exactly how yours is presented, but what I have seen time and time again is, we've got this survey. We would love your feedback. Here's a link. And it becomes more organization centric versus like, we value you. We value your response. This is why we value it. Like, again, focus it on that person. We actually see surveys to be one of the highest engagement metrics within an email welcome series and or donor series. And then what we've also done with this is kind of like a little extra thing, is we've tacked on a donation ask at the end of it. And that donation ask will sometimes align with the questions in the survey. And that donation ask is some of the highest response rates that we see. So.
Cool, that's awesome. Here's a question from, and I don't know their full name, they identified themselves as LV. So LV, this question is for you. They're wondering, do you see unsubscribes spike when you send an email appeal? And I will add my own question onto this. Should you care? And how much should you care?
Gotcha. Okay. So I don't know at what point this was communicated to fundraisers and email marketers that unsubscribes are scary and that we want to like keep everyone captive on our file as long as possible. The answer to that is just going to be unsubscribes are normal and they're healthy and they're going to happen. Do we see a spike in unsubscribes from appeals? if we send a high frequency of appeals in a row, is really the only time when we see a spike in unsubscribes. A great example of that is during calendar year end. You're sending usually multiple emails in a row, and you're going to see a spike in unsubscribes. We know that happens. We're okay with that. That's the whole idea behind email acquisition and why you're continuing to grow your file and all of that. But just these one-off appeals, we don't see a high enough spike in unsubscribes from appeals where it would make us concerned. And again, that whole idea between it being healthy is if they unsubscribe from those appeals, there's a reason why they did that, and whether that's something with them and they just don't connect with you anymore, or maybe it's us that we're not providing enough value to them before we come to them with an ask.
Great. Thanks, Courtney.
Yeah.
Okay, we are just about at time here. I've got 2 more questions I had written down. I know there's more in the chat, but if you want to chat more about one of those questions we haven't gotten to, feel free to shoot me an email. Happy to chat with you that way, but we've got to wrap up for the sake of time. But two final questions. We'll get through here. Question from Erica. Do you ask for a donation in every email or just the last one? Was that just unique to this example you showed, or is that kind of a good rule to live by?
Yeah, I only put it in the last email. Again, the idea of this series, we have to cultivate, present a relevant ask. And like that was in that one example where we like redid the entire series and I showed all the metrics of opens, clicks, all of the different responses from that 7 email series. They had a donation in every ask. And even by removing the donation in every ask and only having it on the last one in the treatment, we saw that 837% increase in donations. So just because like it doesn't make sense to present the ask, what's the one thing you're trying to do? We need to cultivate them first and then present the relevant ask.
Awesome. Okay, final question. This is a fun one and a common one. If you're implementing this type of strategy, now you're getting a ton of replies. How on earth do you handle that?
Yeah, I was like expecting that to come because it's a common one that we get. They're like, you're crazy. We're not going to do it. But I would say embrace it and do it because the value is so worth it. And how do you actually do it? I'll actually tell you kind of a scary thing, a cool thing, and then something tactical. So the organization where we flipped that 7 email series and saw those huge lifts, they actually had to hire a full-time person just to respond and care for people through that series. So that was like remarkable because they saw the value in it. It was a faith-based organization, and their cause, what they realized is that they were doing so much more in their cause by encouraging that response that they hired this additional person for it. How do you actually do it? There's a couple things that you can do. You can actually have, there's most likely very common reply backs that you're going to get depending on the question. And so you can have kind of an automated response that goes back to them. It shouldn't just be a, thank you, we received your response. That's cold and it defeats the entire purpose of it. But you can have something that's automated that is still very human-like. And so you could look at something like that. And then you could also look at just kind of bucketing your responses and doing reply backs, again, having kind of a templated response. It does take a little bit of work and thought and time to think about how you're going to resource that. But once you get it into a system and have a structure in place, it's not as bad as it seems. I know 2,200 responses or 1,500 responses that I mentioned earlier. It's like, yeah, Court, that's a lot. We can't do that, but it is doable. I want to encourage you. It is doable. You just got to think about how best to do that. I think some of the best ways are like, think of like templated responses that are personal, relevant, relational, but that you can do kind of like a mass respond back.
Great. Thank you so much, Courtney. And just skimming through the rest of the questions here, I think we've touched on mostly everything. Right. If you're out there and you're listening and there's a question we haven't touched on, feel free to shoot me an email directly, nathan@nextafter.com. Either I can answer your question or I'll pass it on to Courtney and get her connected with you. just to answer some quick questions that way. So again, email me, nathan@nextafter.com. I will be sending a video recording. I'll be sending slides. I'll be sending some links to additional resources like that ebook we mentioned. So you will have all that in your inbox this evening so you can review it. You can pass on some slides to a colleague or to your boss or whoever it is just to share kind of what you're learning. Thank you again so much for just spending this hour plus with us, hour 15.
Yes.
There's 130 people still on, so spending an hour 15. Again, it's not lost on me on how much work that takes and dedication that takes to really focus on learning, but hopefully your results will be better for it. So all the best to you. We're rooting for you, hoping for the best for your fundraising. We'll see you later. Have a great afternoon, great evening.